bring a little bit of a different perspective to my talk this afternoon, which is all about how we're bringing innovation to life at Burger King. And I'll try and give you some really specific examples of how we're working across our departments, and hopefully leave you with some tips and tricks that you can take back to your organization as well. So my name is Mark. I lead the Ops Services team for Burger King. So that's training, execution, brand standards, and really focusing today on the operations innovation side of the work that we do. So we've already heard so much today about our guests, our collective guests that come and visit us, and their rising expectations. And that's certainly true for us at Burger King as well. We think about it in these three buckets: the convenience bucket, people wanting a frictionless experience. Don talked about that. They want to come how they are. They want to be able to choose their path and their journey and not feel constrained by how we would like to service them. They want a quality experience, hot, accurate food that's really tasty, that's clean, that's better for them, that's good for them. And then they want really nice service. They want hospitality. They want a friendly team member. And they want to have the opportunity to have a human connection every now and then. And those are the three things we're trying to optimize for. And those have certainly always been true for Burger King, but it just feels like over the years, not only has the bar increase, but it just feels like it keeps getting raised faster and faster and faster. And so for many years at Burger King, we've been guided internally, this is not externally facing, but internally by our brand promise, which is that we'll always be the first choice for the best burgers and great tasting food served your way with CARE, which CARE as an acronym stands for Connect, Appreciate, and Respect Everybody. So again, touching on that kind of inclusive feeling, inclusive experience we want to provide for our guests. But so some of you may have heard we've been on this kind of multi-year turnaround strategy called the Reclaim the Flame plan, where we're trying to take a legacy brand, which I know many of you have a storied portfolio, many decades in the making, similar to the 60-year history we have at Burger King, and just trying to think about how do we envision that ops model, how do we envision that design and that building for the next generation, for the next 60 years, and how do we just keep pace with the with our guests, but really set the pace for the industry and try and stay a step ahead. And so what we realized is it's not going to happen at our main office. It's a really cool office. If you've ever landed at the Miami airport, you can see it's right next to the runway there with the big Burger King logo on top. But it's still an office. It's a meeting-centric culture. It's folks getting into small groups, locking themselves into rooms and trying to drive consensus and make decisions. And that's just not really how innovation happens. So after a lot of internal soul searching, we were able to convince our board and our leadership to make a pretty big investment. And so we opened about a year ago what's called the Royal Innovation Center. I'll refer to it as the RIC for short. And the RIC is a dedicated innovation facility, and it's 40,000 square feet. It's located in Miami, but really importantly, it's not actually located right next to the office. And while that makes it slightly more difficult for folks like myself who are trying to shuttle between the two buildings, it actually makes it much easier for the innovation team to do their work because they have a distinct space. They don't have a lot of bleed over from folks that are just hanging out in there. It's very specific because we're really trying to set a different culture. That was the whole reason for dedicating this space, because we've realized the culture at our head office just wasn't conducive to that kind of like fast iteration, breaking things, challenging the status quo. And it's really an interdisciplinary building, so it's really focused on ops, tech, and design innovation. And so in that way, it's kind of very closely related to what we're trying to do here at this conference, kind of sitting at the intersection of design and development, technology, and operations. So let me take you inside and tell you a little bit about some of the work that's happening inside the Royal Innovation Center. So there's a bunch of different parts to this building, but at the very heart of it, in this massive open warehouse space, is a full prototype restaurant. And that, what you're seeing on the screen here, is the latest Burger King image. It's called the Sizzle, so I'll refer to it as the Sizzle design. There's about 100 plus of these already built around the country. And this is really just our latest contemporary image that we're trying to update our assets across the country to. But what it makes this sizzle super special is that it's in our warehouse, so it's not actually serving guests. It's literally only to try new things, only to break things, to rebuild things, and to envision the future of the building itself and the design and the texture and all those wonderful design elements, but also the operational flow. So it's fully life-size, it's fully operational, and it allows us in real time to test different layouts, to test different service flows, and we do that by doing actual real-time simulations. The wonderful advantage we have is that we actually operate the Miami company, the Miami restaurants, the Miami market. It's mostly company operated, so it's easy for us to bring in team members whenever we have a simulation that we want to do some work with. So I wanted to get really specific, and later on I'll try and sum all this up and help you think about how maybe you and with the resources that you have can take some of these approaches as well. So here on the left, you can see kind of what that looks like, that full prototype building inside that giant warehouse. So you can see you have the full building in there, but you also literally have the parking lot around it, which again, for operations is super important because we have a full dual lane drive-through setup that we can reconfigure so we can mess around with stack sizes, understand, what's the most efficient layout depending on any sort of given geography. And then the flexibility of the space really allows us to test different lobby sizes. So I wish we had the intentionality of just like that Don was talking about and really like customizing each space. I think we're a little bit more of a replicate the same box format, but of course our sizing is different. And so having this space allows us to think about how do those design elements scale to a smaller footprint, to a larger footprint, or we can even recreate any of our flagship locations that are becoming due for a remodel. Then of course it's allowing us to do a bunch of building innovation testing there, so we can check out what's the digital flow for our kiosk bank, what's the right way for humans to interact with that, what's the right way for our team members to interact with that, and we can test new ideas like a mobile pickup window hasn't been in the DNA of our brand today. And then of course, as mentioned, we do a lot of drive-through innovation, so we're checking out what's the right drive-through sense from how many lanes do we want, how do we want those lanes to be function, are they full service lanes, is one a pickup lane, is one for digital orders, and just being able to think through that while looking at the lanes and actually being in our golf carts and driving through, we learn so much without ever having to spend any real money out in the real world. And then we're on this big multi-year plan to win back families that we've kind of lost somewhat over the years. So we're looking at expanding that space to be more inclusive of that kind of guest. So we're prototyping new playgrounds, which again can scale up and down with the building, and we'll do that in this innovation space. And then similarly to the gentleman from Pizza Hut, we're looking a lot at terraces and outdoor spaces, which are becoming really popular. And again, just understanding how does that team member interaction work? How do we service that space? How do we make sure it's clean? And so on and so forth. So lots of use cases for that kind of space. Big upfront investment, but when you think about how much money you're saving by moving faster and trying new things, it's well worth it, at least for us. I want to give you one really specific example. I know a lot of you are development people or construction people, and so I wanted to speak up for the operators here, who I know many of you are working with and are trying to create great spaces for that we can actually execute and operate and take care of our guests. So here's a really good example of how the RIC has really helped us to cut down on guest friction and team member friction. So this is a rendering here of a redesigned a standard remodel from our legacy image to a sizzle image. And you can see you have this very intentional kind of like kiosk area over to your right. Then you have this bench where you're waiting on the left, and then you finally pick up your order once it's ready on the order status board. And it's, it looks very beautiful, it's very inviting. And what's not rendered here, but what is happening in the imagination of our development team, is that there's a team member standing there smiling and handing, offering a crown to the guests and welcoming them into the space. And as much as we love to make those things happen all the time, it's just not always possible, right? We're not always going to have the extra capacity to have a team member staff there. They might not be fully utilized. We're largely franchised. Our franchisees control a lot of the labor allocation. And so while this was really beautiful and really intentional, it wasn't super executable from an ops perspective. So through workshopping in the RIC, and actually being in the building, being in the prototype, we were able to adjust this floor plan slightly, and all we did was get rid of that that offset counter, and we brought it back in line. And what that allows us to do is use the existing labor that's already in the restaurant, that's stationed at the expo area, that's right behind that transparent orange wall, and they're able to still do their job while still greeting guests. And by optimizing the sidelines and by making that glass see-through, we were able to maintain all of the sidelines for their team members. So they knew when a guest could come in, and they could greet them, so we're taking care of any potential security concerns and things like that. So this is the kind of thing that in a pre-Royal Innovation Center world would have taken us lots of actual restaurants to figure out, that have spent lots of actual money to get those sightlines wrong to begin with. And then of course those assets are going to be there for 10 plus years, and we don't want to waste that money, and we certainly don't want to hurt the guest experience in that way. So this was a really easy way in which we could use the space to help us get ahead. Next, we do a lot of digital innovation there. So we have a guest journey focus at the Royal Innovation Center. So we have 3 distinct teams, one focused on delivery, one focused on our dine-in guests, and one focused at the drive-thru. They all have their individual paths and targets to make sure we're optimizing each channel. But then of course they're working collaborative in that space so that all of those experiences work together, are harmonized, and as Don mentioned, we're not steering guests any which way. We have the full restaurant tech stack, so we have tech labs there so we can recreate and try. We can literally in real time replicate any restaurant and try and execute their rush in a new ops procedure that we want to try. And then this is honestly my favorite part. Again, it's a little ops heavy, but there's a massive test kitchen in there that we can use for equipment development and again for kitchen layout design. So this space is big enough that we can fit every single kitchen in the United States in there. And again, we're a 60-year-old brand. We have lots of different kitchen designs. So when we innovate for a new piece of equipment that we want to introduce, or we're innovating on a new packaging counter, or we want to change the flow of it, regression testing that stuff is very hard because it has to fit back into all of our existing estate, and I know many of you are tackling that. So having the ability to not just test new stuff here, but then actually lay it out in our most common times has been super helpful for us. And similarly to our sizzle build out, we can do real-time simulations here. So oftentimes we'll bring in our local team members, we'll ask them to use a new widget, we'll ask them to use a new piece of equipment, and you just get all of those human factor learnings that again are just so costly to put out in the real world. So those are kind of the 3 big features, the 3 big areas that we use to envision the future of our guest experience at Burger King. And now I want to talk a little bit about how we get to work at this space. Because again, I already mentioned to you, we were very intentional about this feeling very, very different. And we've heard this morning already from Melissa around the need to co-create experiences together, and we certainly take that very seriously as well. So this is really a space for our franchisees who are ultimately the ones footing the bill for a lot of the things we launch as a brand, for our vendors. So we bring our suppliers and our potential vendors into the space to help us, for our crew as mentioned, and then of course project managed by our corporate team. And the whole idea is it's hands-on co-creation. So although in the back you can see some of like what the nice meeting rooms look like, there's actually not that many of them, because the whole idea is to get people out on the floor, get people into the experience, get people to touch and feel and see and walk around and interact with the innovation and the project that we're working on. And then hugely important, we ask that folks leave their titles at the door. And many of the best ideas we think come from the folks that are closest to the business, that are on the front lines. And if they hear a bunch of fancy titles, they shut down oftentimes. And this is really a space where we want to get all the best learnings out. And so literally when folks come to the RIC for the first time, if you ever have the chance to come visit, we'll give you a little briefing. We'll tell you about the expectation for being at this space, which is all about keeping an open mind, being egalitarian, being inclusive, and most importantly, challenging the status quo and coming up with a better solution. So again, I want to give you a really specific example for how this comes to life. So I bet you some of you out here are using contact toasters. This is a kind of a standard QSR fast food way of toasting your buns. And as you can see, it's very error prone. It toasts the bun by literally squeezing it. And so if those springs aren't exactly right, the bun either burns, as you can see here in the picture, or people loosen them, so the bun just drops right through. You don't have that golden toast. It's a big pain. Team members don't like it. The outcome isn't great for guests. So having this space really allows us to bring, first of all, bring every single toaster out there that's available. We were able to narrow it down very quickly to the type of toasting we want, which is a radiant toast. So then we narrowed it down to the 10 biggest radiant toaster suppliers out in the country, and then figuring out which are the partners that can customize their equipment to work with us. And in a way that would have taken us 2 years in the old way of working, we were able to launch a new piece of toasting equipment customized to our Burger King needs in about 9 months. And again, it's a lot of upfront investment and an intentional way of working together, but you end up getting the savings on the back end. And I think the important part here is how does that change the way we work and we launch things? And so I bet you lots of you work in some sort of stage gate format, or you have design sprints and you're trying to iterate quickly and then scale. And the thing we had to break in our own minds is this notion that things just aren't real until you're actually out in the restaurant. And so there's this expectation that, oh, things won't work until it's validated in the actual location. And we had to really teach the business, hey, every single thing we're learning at the restaurant is gonna upset our guests, it's gonna upset our team members, and it's gonna cost us a lot of money. Every single thing we can learn in our lab is virtually free. So let's not try and rush, let's move fast and break things quickly and iterate, rapidly, but let's not try and rush things out of the lab into a restaurant, and let's really try and squeeze out every single learning early on in this process, so by the time we get to the restaurant, that period is really short. So what you see now in how a project unfolds is we spend a lot more time in the lab, lots of cycles, lots of improvement. We're still moving very intentionally and quickly, but it just takes up more time, and then the validation period in the restaurant ends up being shorter because team member acceptance is higher, guest acceptance has already been validated, and you're just trying to really pressure-proof something out there in the real world, which ultimately will lead to a successful launch. So now, to close it out, I just want to take a step back and maybe help you think about how can you apply some of these ideas to your own business. So I'm sure similarly to us at Burger King, you're facing challenges such as rising expectations from your guests, as I articulated at the outside, not just rising, but changing, and oftentimes changing more quickly. Rising costs, all the inputs are becoming more expensive, and then of course, fierce competition from us here in the room, amongst each other, trying to outperform and grow the industry. And so what this system has allowed us to do is have a dynamic place where we can innovate together, we can adjust, we can move, we can break down walls, we can reconfigure the space to meet our guests' needs. We can do real-time testing so things get off the page and into the real world quicker. And of course, again, it's designed to bring all of the stakeholders together, not just the corporate innovation team. And I want to just leave you with 5 big lessons that I've learned in my time working in the innovation space. So the first one is you have to find your sandbox. And you may be like, Mark, we don't have the money to build a 40,000 square foot facility, and it's kind of like jackpot for me, and I really enjoy getting to work there. But honestly, I've worked at brands before where we've just commandeered a conference room that wasn't used, and we've made it a tiny innovation center. You can even pick a corner of an actual operating restaurant and treat it like your innovation center. Of course, having the resources is really nice, but what's most important is the mindset of having a space where you're leaving your titles at the door and where you're getting to work with others and envisioning the future. Then, of course, this is a classic prototype and iterate often. Take your time in the early stages and learn every single thing you can. Involve all your stakeholders. Don't have it just be your corporate innovation team. Bring your vendors in, bring your franchisees in, bring all the folks in that will ultimately work with the widget you're designing or will be paying for the widget you're designing, because you need to count on their success for a successful launch. And then design for flexibility. That means design an innovation space that can adjust to changing needs, but also design your solution so it doesn't just work for your brand today, but makes the life of the future innovations people 10, 20, 30 years down the line easier when they're trying to regression test back into the space that you're envisioning today. And then lastly, of course, try and make innovation cultural. Try and not just have it be one focused innovation team that's charged with breaking things and rebuilding things. It's nice to have a space for all those people to sit and work, but the space has to belong to everyone. Because when everyone comes together and leaves their titles at the door, I think that's where we find the most powerful breakthrough ideas that can really help us and help you future-proof your business model. So thank you so much, and I look forward to talking to you at the sidelines of the conference.